Hi, my name is Hannah Brown, and I was responsible for just going over and summarizing Chapter 15, Culturally Responsive Literacy Instruction. And so that's what I'm going to do here for you right now. First things first, um, let's move that. Okay, if you can't see, my name is Hannah Brown. I think most of Brown is covered up if I can't really tell for sure, but I'm pretty sure, yeah. Okay, so culturally responsive literacy instruction. Okay, this chapter specifically was by Doris Walker Dollhouse and Victoria J. Risco. Obviously, this presentation is by me, Hannah Brown. Okay, so we have just a couple of guiding questions, and if you can't see these all the way, you know what, actually, move me up here, maybe that'll help. I'll post these also on the message board page too, and so it'll be super easy. The two guiding questions I selected from the chapter were, what is culturally responsive instruction and what implications can be drawn from research investigating its impacts on students' engagement and literacy development and teachers' professional learning. Um, the other one is, how can literacy leaders lead and guide school and district-wide efforts to both advance culturally responsive and equity-based instructional practices and advocate for students. Um, so yeah, basically we'll just be kind of going over that. The topic and the concept of culturally responsive teaching, culturally responsive instruction, culturally responsive pedagogy, culturally relevant pedagogy and instruction, those terms are kind of used interchangeably throughout the chapters. So yeah, here we go. Just a quick summary. Excuse me. So in this chapter, the authors describe the importance of culturally responsive instruction in schools today. Specifically, they speak to literacy leaders and teachers about some of the barriers that can get in the way of this kind of teaching. They also include suggestions for refining instructional practices and curriculum, as well as specific ways literacy leaders can take initiative and lead the way to advance equity. So, basically, I'm just going to go through the big headings in the chapter and just give some extra information and details that were about throughout the chapter in each section. Let's see. So, first section was expectations for culturally responsive instruction, and I know you all can read, so I definitely don't need to read all of this to you, but talked about how culturally responsive instruction is going to be built upon the academic indicators of students' achievements, their cultural competence, their ability to be grounded in their own culture and identities, while acquiring the knowledge and skills to interact effectively with people of different cultures and their socio-political consciousness. That was a lot of words. Essentially, the goal would be to develop students like it said, socio-political consciousness, and focus on encouraging them to take action as agents of change while examining critically the issues of diversity and social justice. And that would be encouraged by their teachers and the people they interact with at this school. Another expectation for this culturally responsive instruction would be that there will be some cultural affirmation and validation going on during the process of teaching, to and through students' strengths. So finding the strengths with them and for them, through their own personal cultures. Also, another expectation of that culturally responsive instruction would be to create culturally sustaining classrooms and I thought this was a really neat visual that provide a mirror in which students can see themselves, a window to understand the perspectives of others, and a doorway through which to consider new paths and possibilities. I thought that was a really neat quote. I definitely think I will write that down on a sticky note to put on my desk in my classroom when we go back. Um, so yeah, those are just some of the expectations. Building upon their achievements, validating and affirming their cultures, and then creating classrooms that students can see themselves in, um, and so on. Okay, some of the barriers to the reality of culturally responsive instruction. So unfortunately, there are some barriers to for some people, for a lot of educators, in to create this kind of a learning environment. So some of those barriers. Let's see. Often, educators in the curriculum in place favor mainstream cultural values and norms without regard to the students whose experience and histories hold their own richness but differ from mainstream view. So a lot of the curriculum in place and a lot of the educators in place, like it says, um, maybe not even on purpose, but often just don't celebrate and don't acknowledge some of the cultural differences the students that are in our classrooms. Um, Another barrier was this talked about in the book was that there are um, obstacles that come from a lack of leadership by the literacy professionals, um, such as low expectations, unwelcoming school community, peer discrimination, and then just a general lack of respect for cultural differences. Finally, one of the barriers was that there are sometimes political and legislative decisions that can deter positive actions. There was a specific example in the book regarding a case in the Detroit Public Schools where, at least at first, um, the federal court ruled not in favor of students and not in favor of learning. And it was honestly, it was just really discouraging to read about. That was on page 308 and 309 in our book. If you want to go look further into that, just the idea that some students weren't as worthy or deserving of the opportunity to learn how to read. It just was kind of discouraging. So if you want to read about that, page 308 and 309. But yeah, those are just some of the barriers to like realistically implementing this culturally responsive instruction. Some of the instructional practices that support equity and diversity. Here were the book just give a few examples. First of all, of ways that we can use our instruction to support, like I said, equity and diversity. First of all, access and actualize students' funds of knowledge. There are three specific ways, like of identifying what students already know, what they what well they said funds of knowledge, the knowledge that they bring with them that they already have, the things that they are already familiar with, the giftedness that they can bring to a situation. Three ways I talked about doing that were through cultural modeling, translanguaging, and then through student-centered approaches. Cultural modeling, they gave one specific example regarding African American middle and high school students and making specific, explicit connections to their um, some of their literacy practices, like their choice of music, their involvement in digital composing, and then their vernacular and rhetorical patterns of conversational language. They talked about yeah, kind of meeting kids uh, in the literacy practices that they love and that they know and that they are comfortable, and really capitalizing on that and then bringing it into the classroom and making connections and finding community and common ground. That was just one example that they gave regarding cultural modeling. Translanguaging, this was more of a English language learners example. They talked about students whose first language wasn't English, translating the text used in the classroom into their um, first language, and then negotiating the meanings and making these collaborative efforts and deepening their understanding not only of the text in English but also in their own first language, which I thought actually was a really cool way of celebrating um, their culture while still teaching those like language arts related skills. of analyzing text and like deepening understanding of literature. The third approach that they suggested was just a general student-centered approach, um, during which students generate the issues and questions that are often derived from their own personal life experience to serve as anchors for learning and instruction, just giving the students ownership over kind of the direction that they want to go with their learning. So yeah, those were 3 ways to just draw on their funds of knowledge. The other thing that the other idea the book gave, or the authors in the book gave about some instructional practices that could support equity and diversity were, um, oh, taking advantage of out of school cultural communities, getting to know students' home and their families, and just reaching out and letting them know that their identities are valued, not just at school, but outside of school, and that who they are matters. Um, Another idea that the authors in the book gave was about resisting and adapting restrictive curriculum to affirm diversity. So going in and making the necessary adaptations and changes to current curriculum to really draw support and affirm diversity, kind of like I said. Um, One of the ways they talked about doing that was through text sets. So being sure that you have literature and books that show images of students and where they can see themselves in their lives and their experiences, which will result in individual valuing and self affirmation. So I thought that was a really good idea. Um, Another thing the authors shared out was about um, teaching, creating inclusive classrooms and value, like having those discussions about differences in impression that is being faced by underrepresented students, and then of course teachers and I think students um, have to question their implicit biases about diversity, um, their perceptions about um, the knowledge and expertise of the families that their students have, impact of their own language when talking with students and about students and their families, and just the ways in which they position some students and not others for success. Um, some other ways to um, just adapt that restrictive curriculum. Um, they talked a lot about names and building positive identities for students, that and helping them just like share like biographical information and history, and using their names and their stories to really help them have that positive identity. Also developing a home, school, community, mutually enabling culture. Um, like I mentioned above, getting to know families and communities, and addressing those biases and narratives that and helping becoming an ally for families and students, and then just really creating that two-way communication. Finally, another way to address that curriculum issue is just building advocacy and civic engagement, preparing students to um, really critique social inequity and get involved in active citizenship, and um, just using the opportunity to practice at school, to really learn how to be agents of social and community change. Um, Finally, the last where are we going? The last way the authors talked about culturally responsive instruction was that literacy leaders can take the initiative to advance equity. We have an opportunity as teachers, as reading specialists, as administrators, as coaches to build knowledge to support literacy leaders' understanding, to hold difficult conversations,